Some games are meant to be fun, but some games are meant to scare you. Tonight, we're diving into a story of friendship, fear, and a night that turned hide and seek into a nightmare. Watch closely. You might start hearing footsteps behind you. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was 15 when it happened. It was late September. The air just began to smell like cold dirt and rain. In our small town, autumn didn't creep in. It dropped like a curtain. The trees were already blushing red, and the street lights flickered earlier each evening. I remember thinking that Friday night felt endless. One of those nights that hum quietly, like they're waiting for something. My parents were out with friends, celebrating an anniversary dinner. They said they'd be home late. My dad had winked at me before they left and said, "Don't burn the place down." I'd laughed, pretending I wasn't excited to have the house to myself. I planned to play games, maybe watch a movie, just a quiet night. But when you're 15, quiet never lasts long. So I called Chris. Chris lived across the street. Same grade, same school, same kind of boredom. He had this easy grin, a little reckless streak that made everything feel like an adventure. We've been best friends since we were 10. By the time he got to my house, the sun had set. The street lamps buzzed, moths circling the halos of light, and the windows were fogged with the first chill of fall. We went down to the basement like always, our usual hideout. There were old couches, a half-broken TV, and posters we put up years ago. We played a few rounds of some fighting game, but eventually, it got boring. I remember tossing the controller onto the couch and sighing. That's when Chris said, half joking, "Hide and seek." I laughed. "What are we, 8? "Come on," he said. "In the dark. It'll be like one of those ghost shows." It did sound dumb, but there was something fun about it too. The idea of sneaking around the house in the dark, the adrenaline, the feeling of being hunted. I shrugged. Fine, but we make rules. We wrote them down on a scrap of paper from my homework notebook. No going outside. No attic, no crawl space. Everything else is fair game. Closets, under furniture, basement, bedrooms. Then, just to make it feel creepier, we turned off almost all the lights. Only the kitchen light stayed on, a dim square of yellow that barely reached the hallway. Chris grinned. "You count first." I sat on the couch, covered my eyes, and started counting. His footsteps echoed faintly on the hardwood. I could hear him running, then nothing. Silence. When I hit 50, I opened my eyes and called, "Ready or not?" The house felt different already, like it was holding its breath. I started in the kitchen. Too small to hide much. Checked the pantry, the broom closet, nothing. Down the hallway, I peeked into the bathroom, then opened the front closet. Empty. I went upstairs, each step creaking under my weight. The sound felt too loud, like I was disturbing something. My parents' bedroom was first, bed made, everything in its usual order. I crouched and lifted the bedskirt, half expecting a hand to shoot out, but it was just dust bunnies and slippers. Next was my room. Clothes on the floor, a pile of school papers on my desk, the faint smell of detergent and cologne. Nobody there either. That left the guest room at the end of the hall. The door was cracked open just a few inches, enough to see darkness inside. "Chris?" I called softly. No answer. I pushed the door open slowly. The hinges gave a soft, complaining squeak. The room smelled like linen and old wood polish. The curtains moved faintly with the wind sneaking through the vent. I bent down to look under the bed. Nothing. Checked the closet. Empty. I laughed under my breath, trying to sound casual. "Okay, fine. You're good." I headed back downstairs. The basement seemed like the last option. The air got cooler as I descended. Shadows stretched long across the floor, broken only by the weak light from a single bulb overhead. Behind a stack of cardboard boxes, something shifted. "There you are," I said, jumping forward. Chris laughed, clutching his chest. "Dude, took you forever." I rolled my eyes. Whatever, my turn. When he started counting, I darted up the stairs. I wanted a spot that would really make him sweat. The guest room seemed perfect, the one that had already felt off somehow. I slid under the bed, pulling the bed skirt down. It smelled faintly like dust and cedar. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. At first, I could only hear the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Then faintly, the sound of Chris counting. 47, 48, 49, 50. Footsteps creaked. They moved through the kitchen, slow and steady. Then up the stairs, each step deliberate. Like he didn't want to scare me. He checked the bathroom, then my parents' room. The sound of a door opening, closing. Then his steps reached the hall outside the guest room. My breathing hitched. The door creaked open. I saw a faint shadow move under the crack of light near the floor. His shoes shuffled across the carpet. Then silence. I could feel him standing right there, beside the bed. Every muscle in my body screamed, "Don't move." Then, as quietly as he came, the shadow disappeared. I waited. 30 seconds, a minute. Then I crawled out, brushing dust off my shirt. "Chris," I called softly. No answer. I went downstairs, expecting him to be laughing on the couch. But he wasn't there. "Game's over." I shouted. From the basement came his voice, still looking. "Where are you hiding?" My blood ran cold. "I'm not hiding," I said. "I'm in the kitchen." Footsteps hurried up the basement stairs. Chris appeared, pale and breathing hard. "Wait," he said. "How did you what?" I checked asterisk that room. I heard something moving under the bed. "I thought you were trying to scare me." I shook my head. I didn't move. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then he forced a laugh. Guess I'm losing it. But something in his eyes said he wasn't joking. We played one more round, but it wasn't the same. Every sound felt too sharp, the click of the house settling, the whisper of air in the vents. At one point, while I was counting, I heard a thump upstairs. When I went to check, there was nothing. Finally, we gave up and sat in the living room, watching TV with the volume low. I remember staring at the flickering light on the wall, trying to shake the tension. Then came the sound. A heavy thud upstairs. We both froze. Chris muted the TV. "What was that?" I swallowed hard. Probably something fell. Then clearer this time, the long, slow creak of a floorboard. Someone was walking. Chris's eyes met mine. "Your parents?" I shook my head. "They're not home till 11. The footsteps moved again. I stood up, grabbed the fireplace poker, and nodded toward the stairs. "Come on," he whispered. "Are you serious?" But he followed. Every step upward sounded like thunder. The air felt heavy, like the house was pressing in on us. At the top, the hallway was pitch black except for the faint light from downstairs. The guest room door closed. I knew I'd left it cracked. Something scraped inside, a dragging sound. Chris whispered, "Let's go." I raised the poker. My hands were shaking. I pushed the door open fast. The room was empty. The closet half open. I yanked it open. Nothing but coats and boxes. Chris exhaled, half laughing. "Dude, I'm losing my mind." Then the front door opened. We both froze. A heavy click, then the sound of it closing again. Someone had come in or gone out. "Hide," I whispered. We ran to my room and crouched behind the bed. Lights on. The house was so quiet I could hear my pulse. Then faint footsteps downstairs. Whoever it was moved slowly, like they knew we were there. I realized my phone was still on the couch. No way to call for help. We waited, hearts pounding, until the footsteps reached the basement door. It creaked open, then stairs. 1, 2, 3. Going down. Chris mouthed, "Run." We bolted. Down the hall, down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door. Cold air hit my face like water. We didn't stop running until we were pounding on his front door. His mom opened it, startled, and we spilled out our story in gasps. She called the police. The officers searched every inch of the house. Basement, closets, attic. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No open windows. They told us it was just a house settling, or maybe we scared ourselves. But Chris and I both knew better. Something had been there. Something that breathed, that moved, that dragged its feet across the carpet. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up certain that someone was standing in my doorway. I'd hear creaks and whispers, even when I knew the house was empty. My parents never understood why I started locking my door. Chris stopped coming over as much after that. When we did talk, we didn't mention the game. But sometimes, in the hallway at school, I'd catch him looking at me with that same unsettled expression, as if he was remembering too. Years later, when I was packing for college, I found that old scrap of paper, the list of rules we wrote for hide and seek. The corner was torn, and there was something scrawled on the back in handwriting that wasn't of mine or Chris S. It said, "Your turn to hide." I stared at it for a long time before throwing it into the trash. But sometimes at night, when the house settles and I hear faint creaks upstairs, I still half expect to hear footsteps coming down the hall or the quiet, breathy sound of someone counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.